Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We'll be starting in just 1 minute while everybody's signing in. Thanks for joining us. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We're excited you've joined us for today's session on ideas for branding your windows, walls, and floors. A few housekeeping details before we get started. This session is being recorded, and you should receive a link to the recording tomorrow by email. Please feel free to share this webinar content with your colleagues that could not attend today. A question and answer session will follow the presentation. If you have a question for our speakers, please type it into the questions box in your GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. This webinar is hosted and sponsored by Suttle-Straus. Suttle-Straus was founded in 1910, and over 110 years, our company has built up the equipment and expertise to handle almost any print project. We offer creative design services, web, sheet fed, and digital printing, displays and signage like what we're going to be showing you today, direct and transactional mail, custom online marketing portals, kitting and fulfillment, and now promotional products. For more information on any of our services, please visit us on the web at Suttle-Straus.com. My name is Megan Nicholson. I'm the marketing manager at Suttle-Straus, and today I'm joined by Eddie Mason, our art director, and Amy Olson, a graphic designer who specializes in environments. So to kick things off today, this is our agenda. We're going to be looking at different areas of offices and schools and buildings. So we're going to take a look at lobbies and entrances, history and mission displays, conference rooms and offices, employee health and wellness spaces, elevators and stairwells, and recognition displays. Throughout the presentation, you're going to see a few trends that inspire employees and attract customers. So we're just highlighting these trends up front, and then when we show you an example that includes one of these trends, we'll try and remind you of that. First trend is to focus on employee experience. In today's job market, attracting and retaining employees is key to keeping your business running at its full potential. Since people spend the majority of their waking hours in the office, or they used to, corporations are making it a priority to make their office spaces as welcoming and pleasant as possible for their staff and visiting guests. Making a good first impression. If customer and prospect meetings happen at your office, then it needs to be considered a brand touch point from a marketing perspective. After a visit to your place of business, do you want people to say, wow, or ew? You can use your front entrance to make a statement. If you offer tours, you can use design to highlight certain areas of the company you want people to remember. Another trend is bringing nature indoors, especially here in Wisconsin, where the winters can be harsh and employees spend the majority of their day inside. Companies are trying to bring the outside in through use of nature imagery and other natural elements. This can be especially useful in rooms with no windows or natural light sources. Scenes of nature can help reduce stress and make workers more productive. Our next trend is layered and dimensional effects. Rather than just a flat wall with paint or wallpaper, a growing trend is use of many layers to create a dimensional effect. Dimensional component displays produce natural shadows, giving them a fuller, more polished appearance. And then finally, reinforcing your culture and values. The average person spends more than 90,000 hours of work over their lifetime, and the reality is we spend more waking hours at work than we do anywhere else. So if you've defined your company core values, you can use graphics to infuse them into employees' everyday lives. All right, we're going to kick it off with lobbies and entrances. Our first one is a hello wall credit union. Companies that are on the leading edge of diversity and inclusion efforts are making sure that even their environments are representative of all cultures and backgrounds. So this is the Summit Credit Union headquarters, where they've included the hello wall with greetings in more than 40 different languages.
Yeah, this 110-foot wall was achieved using contour cut vinyl printed a light gray. The client wanted the display to be something employees saw when they first walked in, but didn't want it to be too overwhelming, hence the tone-on-tone that we use. However, we did highlight a few of the words with PVC lettering and a pop of yellow paint to add some highlights.
An example of the layered and dimensional trend we mentioned, this entrance to the Kohl Center incorporates a hex pattern topped by custom cut letters and logos to create a multi-layered scene, which is much more visually appealing than a flat graphic would be.
So athletic spaces like this are really developed for one reason, and that's really to inspire the home team as they prepare for the fight ahead. This entry to an arena floor was created using some very common materials, PVC, adhesive vinyl, and lots of red paint.
Yeah, so this hallway is never seen by the general public or the audience. It's exclusively for the players on their walk from the locker room to the court or the ice rink, depending on the season. When you go through a rebranding effort, one of the best places to show it off is on your own building. You can get employees aligned with the new brand look and show it off to visitors.
So we got lucky with this project. One of the new brand colors that Exact Sciences incorporates is purple, and we were able to get a purple film that matched their branding. So that way we didn't need to print on the material, and then it stayed semi-transparent, so it just doesn't block any light when you're inside. And then the gray hexagons, or sorry, the gray helixes are achieved using a frosted vinyl.
You can integrate some local art or hometown love into your office space. Some offices have worked with artist neighbors to replicate their artwork as large murals by having us printed onto wallpaper. Or for this example, a specialty insurance company had this dimensional 13-foot Madison skyline display created with multiple layers in their brand colors for the entrance hallway.
So this display has a lot of impact, but really utilizes just one material, which is dye bond. The skyline layers were printed and contour cut and then placed in a track system with slots that were spaced apart to give this multi-dimensional effect, but essentially was one material.
Summit Credit Union had us create 2 display areas in their lobby. The first was a custom wall display at their headquarters with a box to hold the groundbreaking shovel and pictures from the building process.
Yeah, most of the components for this groundbreaking display are standard pieces. The images are printed on canvas and then stretched over wooden frames, and the headline is cut from PVC. The shovel box, however, is completely custom. Most ready-to-purchase display cases are made of wood, and you can only see through the front. That style doesn't really match the new modern look of this headquarters building, so our team created a box made out of PVC and clear acrylic that allows the ceremonial shovel to stand out and be seen on all 3 sides. And then further down the hall is this testimonial wall. This is something the client wants to update on a regular basis, so we made this display magnetic. The PVC backer has a magnetic receptive face applied to it, and then the testimonials are printed on a magnetic substrate. This design allows for the customer to choose how many testimonies they want to update at one time, since they're all individual pieces.
Fiskars Orange was officially trademarked as a color in Finland in 2003. Of course, when they moved into a new office in Middleton, they added a splash of it on their walls. Through the top, you can see a foam letter logo with a PMS color-matched paint. Their iconic orange-handled scissors were printed on wallpaper, and then canvas-wrapped foam core prints help tell the company's story. They're printed at various sizes and installed on a cleat grid system that allows them to swap out panels and use a variety of size and orientation scenarios.
Yeah, so as Megan alluded to, there's a number of materials used for this. But this is really just a perfect way to reinforce your brand to visiting customers as well as your own employees. Some elements you see here are essentially teaching tools that tell the story and the history of the company, while others, such as the Fiskars logo at the top, are simply for impact.
Next, we're going to move along to some examples of history and mission displays. Our first one comes from the team at Sub-Zero, and it just demonstrates that your walls can speak. They can communicate your company's history. These walls can be used for visitors as a tour point of interest.
This display uses a lot of different techniques, including images printed on PVC, images printed on acrylic with spot white ink, some vinyl elements, contour cut PVC lettering with brushed metal vinyl applied to the face. The lettuce and bread and pineapple you see were printed on clear vinyl and applied directly to the wall. And the ice cube and light bulb were printed on acrylic using different opacities of white to get a very specific effect. And then as we talk about history walls in the next two slides, I want to point out that there are ways to leave room for growth in your display if you know that you'll continue to add notable milestones throughout the years. So just keep that in mind.
Palmer Johnson Power Systems created this history wall featuring their equipment and photos of important points in the company's growth.
Yeah, so this is another good way to mix flat graphics with a little dimension. A subtle wallpaper graphic containing historic photos works kind of as the anchor to the display, while PVC and acrylic panels educate the viewer on the company's history. The white PVC, which is a very matte substrate, alongside the glossy black acrylic, really does give added interest with that contrast of sheen.
And here you'll see some of our own history walls at Suttle-Straus. A visual representation of where your company has come from can be a powerful training tool for new employees and instill confidence of your expertise when customers and prospects come to visit. So we have these history wall wraps that showcase our 110 years in business with some retro photos of employees and equipment from our past.
Our history walls are printed on wallpaper and our logo is cut from PVC. It's important to note that our displays are in areas that are lit by natural light, so it was important for us to use a substrate with a matte finish and a slight texture. So keep that in mind if your wall is going to have a lot of glare, to pick the right substrate so you can still read it easily.
Here is an example of a Goldfish Swim School values wall. This is in their corporate headquarters. And it's more likely people will read and remember these large words on a wall rather than on your website. These statements should be able to stay in place for many years, but it's always good to plan how you would update the display in the future if you needed to make a change.
So some of what we're featuring, some of these projects are more complex than others. This one is another very simple execution, really using only cut PVC and a coat of orange paint. This is what I would call impact on a budget. As you see in the slide, the dimensional letters work with the existing lighting to create those dramatic shadows that Megan alluded to earlier.
Again, another example from here at Suttle-Straus. These are our mission and values walls. We have them in 3 different areas of the company. Now, values can mean very little if they are just printed in an employee handbook that gets shoved in a desk drawer. So having your values prominently displayed, where employees can encounter them frequently, can be a good way to reinforce their usage in everyday work.
Yeah, our values walls use a mix of vinyl, PVC, and acrylic. Most of our messaging will never change for this display, but there's always a chance that our mission statement may be updated every few years, so we design that section with hardware, and it can be easily changed out when we need to.
All right, next we're going to move on to show you some examples of conference rooms and office spaces. So thank goodness, long gone is the design trend to put conference rooms in a fishbowl, a room with walls full of glass where passersby can stare awkwardly at the people hosting a meeting inside. Partially transparent window films can be put over these glass walls to create enough privacy for the meeting attendees while still letting outsiders know that the room is occupied.
So this is another example of a fairly simple execution, really using one material. So by printing translucent inks on a frosted vinyl, really does create a cool backlit effect from either natural or artificial light showing through from the other side. This is really just a clever and creative way to create a sense of privacy in a conference room.
Here's another example from Summit Credit Union. Their training rooms were decorated with custom designs to inspire, as you see on the wall, innovation and creativity. A divider could split the room in half for smaller meeting needs.
This room is mostly wallpaper with 2 pieces of PVC for dimensionality. And then knowing that the divider wall will be in place sometimes, the design is split so that the graphic works as 2 separate pieces as well as a whole room.
In a recent survey by Capital One, 86% of millennials reported that companies cannot encourage innovation unless their workplace and environment is innovative. So the use of artwork and imagery helps work environments inspire creative thinking.
So this is my team's everyday work environment, or a glimpse of. None of us really wanted to look at boring, solid colored walls any longer, so we took the opportunity to bring inspiration into the room, which I would say is a welcome addition to any area that requires creative thinking. Using printed wallpaper, contour cut PVC, the room now proudly features hand-chosen inspirational pop culture figures, along with accompanying bios that were submitted by my team.
Who wouldn't love to stare at Bob Ross all day?
I want to make a note. Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the bios are done in contour cut vinyl so that when the wallpaper was installed, we didn't have to worry about small words being misaligned.
That is absolutely correct. So just to clarify, the photos you see on the wall, the tone-on-tone photos, was a continuous image printed on wallpaper. So when it's installed, you'll have those seams about every 48 to 50 inches where one piece of wallpaper butts up to the next. With text the size that we have it here, it's really risky that the text might fall on the seam, and then one little glitch at install, suddenly your copy doesn't line up with itself. So we decided to, after the wallpaper was installed, not only did we install the dimensional PVC lettering over top of that, we also installed cut vinyl for the bios themselves and didn't have to worry about whether those write-ups were seamed or not.
When you are considering office decor, it's always a good idea to take diversity and inclusion into consideration. Summit Credit Union made sure they used different languages in their decor, as we saw on the hello wall at the beginning, as well as quotes from thought leaders of different races, like this training room wall with a quote attributed to Martin Luther King Jr.
This space is a great example of how you can fill a wall but still make it subtle. By making this quote out of white PVC, the letters range from 10 inches to 24 inches without being too distracting. And then Summit has a very specific set of colors they're using in their headquarters. So we wanted to keep everything consistent, and we had the letters painted on the edge. But if you wanted to create a look like this for a little bit cheaper, you could choose a substrate that has a standard fill color. For example, a black fill with a white face is an easy option that we can find instead of having something custom painted.
Here's some advice that don't be afraid to have a little fun with your space. Obviously, we did that in the creative area at Suttle-Straus, and here's another example. Everything is awesome in this training room where custom building brick wall mural inspires teamwork.
So of the examples you've seen to this point, this one would be a little more on the complex side. We have a mix of vinyl for our teamwork lettering, and then we have different levels of different layers of PVC for the building blocks. But that multi-dimensional effect really brought this room to life. As you might imagine, precise measurements prior to design, and then completely accurate install instructions were critical to the success of the finished piece. You can see we even meet other building blocks toward the back of the room in the corner. Precision is key for a project like this.
This fun learning center training room for Sub-Zero featured multiple branded displays using a magnetic wall featuring easy to update images and dimensional lettering.
Yeah, Megan said it. Everything you see here is magnetic. That includes the PVC lettering. It was made this way so that it could be updated when products change out, and that allowed the longevity of this display to be cost effective.
Now we're going to turn our attention to some employee health and wellness spaces. Often forgotten are small, quiet places where employees can go to take a break from their work for a few minutes. Rather than just leave them a choice between the restroom or the cafeteria, you can offer a bit of respite within your office walls for a chance to rejuvenate.
So I have to say, when this space was completed and I walked in for the first time following the install, it really does take you to the beach. It's an amazing space. We have our wallpaper on the left. You might or might not even be able to see a utility box that we covered with the wallpaper, fell right in the middle of where our graphics are, and it's completely camouflaged. If you look closely at the printed wallpaper, you'll notice the horizon line where the water meets the sky. That continues onto the windows using a translucent adhesive vinyl that we printed to. And this, of course, creates a great backlit effect, again, from the natural lighting outside.
A new benefit that has recruits excited about working for a company is dedicated spaces for health and wellness, like a company gym. Knowing they don't need to shell out money for a local club membership and can conveniently exercise before or after work is a perk that can differentiate your company in the local market. Now make sure this space is clean and inviting. Nobody wants to work out in the dark and dank basement.
The walls in this space were already painted bright colors to give energy to the space. So we chose active imagery that matched the color scheme and then highlighted the rest of the walls with inspirational words. Everything here is contour cut vinyl. I'd like to note that equipment in these areas is likely to always block your graphics, and also that equipment might need to be moved around in the future if they get more equipment. So it's important to keep that in mind when you design your gym. It just needs to be a little more flexible than a traditional room would need to be.
Creating spaces that allow employees to change up their screen time, like these treadmill desks, show employees and visitors that employee health is a priority.
So Megan mentioned earlier in the webinar about bringing nature indoors. This is a prime example of that. What you're looking at really are three treadmill stalls that are all side by side by side. So you have a choice of three paths, whichever one you want to walk or run down. You know, much like we talked about in the creative room with solid color painted walls, no one wants to exercise looking only at solid colored walls. It's not inspirational and it's not fun.
All right, now we're going to look at some elevators and stairwells. This is an area of a building that's often not even thought about. So maybe this will give you some ideas. So check out this fantastic stairway that brings the University of Wisconsin brand from one level to the next. Produced with adhesive vinyl, PVC, and paint, this display turns boring cinder blocks into eye-catching branded walls.
Yeah, we're looking at the image on the left, and it's kind of hard to see in just this one image, but this space is a mix of old construction and new, which means that there was a lot of different surface areas throughout this 4-level stairwell. We put graphics like you see here in any of the large open areas, but what really tied everything together was giving the entire space a fresh coat of paint. That included painting over some exposed plumbing in some corners. By simply making the walls and ceiling one color, your eye can then focus on your graphics instead of on any imperfections in the construction.
Then on the right, we see a stairway at Heaving, the ad agency here in town. Design elements can help encourage healthy behaviors by making the stairs a more attractive option than the elevator.
So here's another example of a fairly simple execution with lots of impact. A coat of red paint and contour cut white acrylic applied over top. This particular execution was largely successful because, as you see, it has an open staircase, and that allows you to see through to the message on the walls behind.
If you have an especially large space with high ceilings or a long staircase, this is where you can create a sense of grandeur. Go big and bold to create a wow space for employees or to show off to visitors. These 4-story staircase graphics were printed on a chrome wallpaper to make the stars shine within constellation patterns.
Yeah, Megan basically said it all. This wallpaper has a chrome finish, so where we didn't put ink, you can see the silver reflection. But I'd like to note that even where we did lay down ink, which is a majority of this, the metallic still gives it a metallic shimmer that shows through the ink. So although most of this 4-story graphic is full flood ink, the whole thing has a shimmery effect.
So I want to reinforce what Amy just said there. A 4-story graphic. We tried our best to capture good photography of the finished space, but it was so vast, there was no way to get the entire graphic. But it was basically 3 stairways right over top of one another, and we were filling in the voids in between each staircase. which yielded roughly a 45 to 50 foot tall singular graphic. Pretty amazing.
These elevator graphics consist of multiple substrates, including polycarbonate, vinyl flooring, and an adhesive vinyl with luster lamination. The end result is a very convincing space.
So elevators are often forgotten about, but they're a great place to be creative and have a little fun. In the first example on the left, the spiral stairs you see are actually an image printed on transparent flooring and then installed in the elevator cab. Then that is seamlessly matched up with sidewall graphics and creates an incredible bottomless stairway effect. And believe me, I've been in this particular elevator since the install, and it is amazing how realistic it is. Additionally, looking at the example on the right and the next couple of slides we show, elevator exteriors can often disappear with a comprehensive graphics plan. If we go to the next slide, Megan, in this case, we merged wall graphics with an elevator door graphic, and then we went one step farther and even wrapped the sidewalls of the elevator entry for the seamless graphic effect that you see. Turned out really cool.
Now, of course, these graphics have to fit your company culture. Some of these are a little far out from a certain software company out in Verona. If that doesn't match your culture, that's fine, but gives you some great ideas. And our final topic is going to be recognition displays, different ways you can recognize your company, your employees, your customers, or sports teams. You can go beyond just hanging certificates on a wall or putting trophies on a shelf. Designing a recognition wall with graphics and a pleasing layout draws the eyes much more than single frames just put up haphazardly. Playcon created this custom display to showcase the patents they have obtained for their inventions.
So by now in the webinar, you're familiar with printing on acrylic, and you see a lot of that here, but what's unique about this piece is that the backer isn't actually made out of wood. We printed that wood pattern on PVC, and since ink can build up, giving it a raised texture, you can actually feel the grain when you run your hand down it. That's a great way to achieve the appearance of wood without paying the price for actual wood.
I'm assuming PVC will stand up over time better than wood as well without any warping.
Yeah, when you install natural wood, there's a chance that in a few weeks it has shifted, warped, expanded. So if that's not something you want to address a few weeks down the road, this is a great alternative to that.
If your company has a large focus on continuous improvement or CI methods, you can create a CI board that could feature comments from customers, results of a Kaizen event, a root cause analysis, or coaching patterns for management.
So I'll apologize for the pixelated image on the left. Unfortunately, that's the highest resolution photo we had. We have a display similar to this in our own facility. And essentially what you're seeing is a PVC backer we printed directly to. And then we have acrylic pockets that are installed with hardware that leaves a slight gap between the back side of the pocket acrylic and the front side of the PVC. And this really allows our customers to slide printouts of monthly winners in and out of the pockets as needed. The translation of that is ongoing updates are extremely affordable. It's basically the cost of a few sheets of paper on the customer's printer.
Yeah, so if you have a Employee of the Month recognition program, this could be a great solution for that. Dodgeville High School chose to honor alumni who went on to serve in the military with a veterans wall. A good designer will work with the school consultatively to ensure a display will work on different textured backgrounds, including brick, cement, cinder block, or drywall.
Yeah, we used our brick vinyl to create the background for this display, along with PVC lettering and acrylic panels. Gathering information for a display like this that goes back decades can be a bit of a challenge, and the client knew that there would be a chance they missed a few names during the first print. So we designed these panels to be printed on a cheap, thin plastic material that is sandwiched between the more expensive acrylic. That way they can have a high-end finish, but with a cheap reprint and install.
Employee recognition programs aim to increase employee engagement, improve job satisfaction, and reduce turnover. If they're done right as part of an overall company culture, they can even show an impact on the bottom line. Employees here at Suttle-Straus are encouraged to nominate their fellow colleagues for a Key Employee of the Year award, which is given out at our annual awards night event. Leadership picks the winners from the submitted nominations, and the winners get a custom printed plaque that resides on a recognition wall in our training conference room.
So I'm confident I'm not alone, that most of us like to be recognized for our efforts at work. That is definitely embedded into our culture here, and this display does that very thing. This was executed using multiple substrates, including adhesive vinyl, PVC, and dye bond. The plaques themselves sit in a track system that allows for spacing adjustments depending on how many award winners we have each year.
When planning displays, keep in mind that they should be able to be updated easily and cost effectively every time you need to add a new name, a new award, or a new year to the list. Be sure to think about the future and leave space in your display for many years to come.
Yeah, so a great way to cost effectively do updates is to make part of your display digital. Monitors can be updated at little to no cost, which is great, but it's important to keep in mind that you might need to have some of the information accessible outside of the monitor in case the monitor is turned off or people don't have time to wait for the slides to cycle through. Digital displays are also great for spaces like we're showing here. There wasn't enough room to have individual plaques for each Wall of Fame winner. So instead, the plaques you see include just the person's name for each year, and then the monitor will have a slide for each person that will include more details.
And so you can see this display has years going all the way up to 2042, so it should be good for the next 22 years.
Yeah, longevity is really important, especially in school settings. They don't have the budgets that some corporations do, so we always want to keep in mind how long can they keep going on a display so they can get the most for their money, and then how can they update that affordably.
This wall was created for the University of Wisconsin men's hockey team, proudly displaying their 6 national championship trophies against a custom wallpaper print of their hockey arena. This display celebrates the red and white.
So this is actually in the hockey locker room, viewable from a hallway outside. But the nature of the content here, they definitely wanted to keep it semi-secure, but yet be something people could see when they walk by. The history of the hockey program's success, very easy for the onlooker to digest simply by seeing the multitude of championship trophies on display. They kind of speak for themselves. As Megan mentioned, this is simply a printed wallpaper background, some cut PVC, and then we sourced a shelving system.
Now, I'm sure UW is expecting to win more national championships, and they have a expansion in mind for this wall when they're going to need to update it, right, Eddie?
Correct. And unlike, Amy had mentioned high schools on a tight budget, a little more money to spend from a University of Wisconsin standpoint, And another national championship would sometimes call for rethinking the entire space. But yes, it is built in such a way that we can keep adding more trophies as they win them.
If your company wins multiple awards over the years, this is a unique design that allows for a continuous way to update and display awards. The individual hexagons, which are attached to one another using plastic jump rings, are made of brushed aluminum die bond and measure about 3 inches each.
I think this is a great example of how to make a standard award plaque stand out by using unique shapes as well as the easy to update system. They now have a display that people are going to notice, and they can continue to extend it without any hassle.
Here's another example from the University of Wisconsin. This time, the Badgers football team wanted a wall to celebrate all former players who went on to become first-round NFL draft picks. Wallpaper, colored acrylic, and PVC came together harmoniously in this space, resulting in a dramatic, impactful display.
Yeah, so really not much more to say here. This is another example of contrasting glossy acrylic over a matte wallpaper. When considering mixing sheens like that, as Amy mentioned earlier, keep in mind the light that is going to be in the space. For instance, a lobby area with lots of windows probably doesn't call for a ton of acrylic, as the glare could be overwhelming. However, in a space such as this, minimal artificial lighting, concerns of glare are greatly reduced. This is really a judgment call that you have to make when you perform your site survey and you better understand what materials are called for. All right, so that's pretty much the end of our slideshow. There are some design considerations I wanted to review with everybody. Different than designing a postcard or a brochure. When you're thinking in terms of scale, like we've discussed here today, there are certain considerations you must keep in mind. First and foremost are sight lines. You must understand where the viewer will be in proximity to your display. This might be less important when you're simply adding a texture to some of your walls for some background interest. But especially when you're including photos or text or things of that nature, these should be positioned in a way that the content can be easily consumed by the viewer. Viewing distance, similar to sight lines, it comes down to the content being consumed properly. We've all seen, for example, billboards along the road. The successful ones are easy and quick to read. You're driving down the road, you don't need to be reading a paragraph. But conversely, I'm sure we've all seen the poor billboard designs where they might use several sentences or long phrases and impossible to read while you're driving. Not only is it dangerous to look away from the road that long, it's often not printed large enough to even read from more than a few feet away. And so this principle is no different for interior graphics like we've seen today. Interior versus exterior, often overlooked. This is a hugely important consideration. Where you want your display installed will greatly affect the materials we recommend. Some materials that we use regularly stand up to the elements, and others are really meant for interior use only. A construction term that I've used my whole life: measure twice, cut once. It's no different in these types of executions. Poor measurements equate to unsuccessful installs. There's no getting around that. That can translate to rework and return trips by installers once something is fixed. These are all very costly, and you want to avoid them as much as you can. Communicate challenges. So we like to perform our own site surveys when we can, but logistically, it's not always possible. We count on the customer to provide us with wall measurements, things of that nature. But wall surfaces, textures, things like that will, again, dictate which materials we recommend. It's also a good idea to share multiple photos of a space with your design and production teams, just in case we might pick up on something that could be a challenge that you didn't realize was a challenge. And then thinking dimensionally, as you've seen, a little dimension can go a long way in terms of visual interest. And contrary to popular belief, this can often be done very affordably. And then finally, obstacles. Kind of related to communicating challenges, obstacles can cause significant problems at the time of install if they were not accounted for. Obstacles can be light switches, electrical outlets, thermostats, fire strobes, you name it, anything that interrupts your canvas. When performing a site survey, it's every bit as important to capture precise obstacle locations as it is to get the wall measurements themselves.
Great. Now we'll open it up for questions. If you have a question for our speaker about anything you've seen today, please type it into the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. While people are submitting questions, just wanted to remind everyone that this webinar is hosted and sponsored by Suttle-Straus. So everything you've seen here today, we had a hand in. We may not have designed every piece you've seen, but we produced it, printed it, and then helped with installation. So whether you just need a printer to print the wallpaper that you have in mind, or you would like design help starting from a blank wall, we can offer a complete service or just a part of that service. So you can check out our galleries on our website at Suttle-Straus.com. So Eddie, a first question. I heard PVC and acrylic a lot in this presentation. What are your thoughts on the environmental impact of these materials, and do you have any suggestions for more eco-friendly alternatives?
There is no question that is a point of contention in this world. PVC and acrylic is used frequently because it's cost effective, especially PVC. Our customers, we communicate to them that that is not a material that is recyclable, and it's really up to the customer whether that's something they want to accept or not. We do have alternative materials that we sometimes use that are recyclable. They tend to be not as durable.
I would like to note too that as the trend as a world goes towards recyclable and paying attention to environmental impact, we are seeing new substrates introduced all the time, whether we've had a chance to use them or not. They are becoming more readily available. They just come, it takes a little longer for the R&D to actually get these substrates into mass production, but as the years go on, we are going to see more and more options, and I do believe they will become more affordable and more durable.
Agreed.
All right, our next question from Yoli asks, how would you work with out-of-state clients?
Well, we actually do that currently. We have a number of out-of-state clients. Typically, this is where we talked about communicating challenges from the customer. If it's not something that we can readily do our own site survey, we work very closely with their marketing team, their construction team, get precise measurements, wall surfaces, obstacle locations, all of that stuff, and then always request photos of the space, because as I mentioned earlier, something that the customer may think is completely benign could end up being a real problem when we go to install if we're not aware of it. It could be a flush mounted utility box cover that's flush mounted to the wall, so the customer might think, well, that's no problem. Yes and no. If we're putting wallpaper or vinyl up, yeah, we can cover that and trim around it and it'll look beautiful. But if we have something dimensional that we're going to need to mechanically fasten to the wall, say with a stud system, if it falls right where one of those obstacles fall, we have to rethink. And that's never fun to do at the 11th hour during install.
And something to note too, especially on new construction that you might need an out-of-state person to help with, regular photos on a weekly, bi-weekly, whatever your timeline is helpful, because one day you might not have an obstacle, and then 2 weeks later there could be one that no one knew was going in. So especially new construction, we want to see regular photos taken in the space just to address any of those issues. And then also, sometimes when we send everything out to be installed, a project manager may go along with that to help ensure everything is installed correctly.
Yeah, we work with installers across the country.
Yeah, we have a network that we like to rely on.
As far as budget, can you work with almost any budget? You just change the way you approach it?
I would say within reason, yes. There are definitely more affordable substrates. You know, the more premium substrates come with a price tag, but they oftentimes deserve that price tag because they offer something unique from the more standard substrates. You know, install costs are what they are. These are not easy to install. That's where we tend to not have as much wiggle room. But as far as materials used, things of that nature to bring costs down, you know, we are budget driven on every project that we work on. And so it's really up to the customer on what they're prepared to spend, because you could have a $5,000 turnkey display that could turn into $20,000 really easily if you want to use only premium materials. Most don't choose to do that. They want to stay more budget friendly. And you know, another reason why we hear a lot of PVC, it's a very affordable material.
Yeah, if you do think you have a low budget, that's just nice to talk to the sales rep and the designer about at the beginning, because sometimes we can give you an idea depending on your wall size. If you have a 45-foot wall and you're only looking to spend $1,500, we can tell you that there's no way to cover that wall with that budget. So if you do have a number in mind, we're not going to try to use every penny of your budget. It's just helpful to know the scale you're looking at and a range that you're willing to spend on, and we can tell you, yes, we can put something in that space, or you're not going to get what you want for that price budget, and then we can try to work with you on either scaling back or what we can do to meet that.
Yeah, as you've seen in our examples, we have everyone from high schools to the University of Wisconsin, which have very different budgets. So you've seen the high end and the low end. Are there any differences in working with new construction versus trying to retrofit something into an existing space? Does your approach change at all?
It does, in the fact that with new construction, if the customer lets the contractor know early enough in the process, and even the architects, that, hey, we want a graphics package as part of this space, then we'll get on the same page with them earlier than later and show them some concepts that we've shown our customer. You know, make sure that, you know, we're not interrupting anything important or critical, such as a fire strobe, with what we're wanting to do, or maybe they have the ability early on in the process to move that fire strobe somewhere else. Versus an existing space, you're kind of working with whatever you're left. So all of the electrical's already been run, all your outlets, all of those things are already established. Now we're finding we're working around those obstacles more often versus new construction, where, as I mentioned, if you're in early enough with the architects, you can maybe even keep those obstacles from appearing on a given wall from the get-go.
Yeah, there's kind of pros and cons to new construction and old construction. Again, like I said, with the new, sometimes things pop up later that no one was aware was going to be there because they weren't on early renderings or anything. So there are some hiccups with new construction as well. But something to know with old construction too is whether anything needs to be removed from the wall or patched. That's just an additional step that might be added into the install process if we have to take anything down or patch holes in concrete or anything like that. So all things we can do, just might add a few extra days to your install if we have to fix anything that's being removed.
Great. Well, that's all the questions we have for today. If you have a question that comes to mind later, feel free to email it to me at info@Suttle-Straus.com. Watch your email tomorrow for a copy of the recording and a copy of the slides that you can go back to and visit later. And be sure to visit us at Suttle-Straus.com if you have ideas to change your space in the future. Thanks, Amy and Eddie. And everybody have a great day.
Thank you.